Hey guys, welcome to another video. And before we get started, I would highly appreciate if you guys could like, subscribe, and comment what you guys would like to see, what you guys like that I do, and what you guys think I can do better. Thank you. And without further ado, let's get into the video. When I first spawned in, I took these two Wistelias out of the breeding pen because one was obviously older than the other. Then I went ahead and put the egg into the egg incubator. Then I went ahead and made up cement. Then I went and hatched my egg, giving me a Wistelia. And then I finished up making some cryogenic coolant. Then back at the volcano, I went and claimed this left monk effigy. Then I claimed this egg. Then I went ahead and cheesed Flare because for some reason he was just sitting right there and letting me shoot him in his head, but I had no problem with it. I also then found this egg, and this one, and this one too. Then I found this lady again and decided to sit in the chair for her, but she keeps giving me mid loot, so next time I might just kill her. Got this fast travel. Oh yeah, and this one too. Then I got this egg too. Then I decided to enter another death dungeon. But I'm sure you guys know how that went. But yeah, after that, I was then able to get my stuff. I then broke my legs for this fast travel point. Then I went and found another egg. Like, bro, I'm stealing so many babies.
What do you mean by that?
Then I went back to base so I could revive my dead Gale Claw. And in the meantime, I decided to replace it with a Hengu. And then I went back and found another egg, and another egg, and then his twin brother, and then another egg, and then another egg. And then I decided to try and catch this Duma guild, but his family wasn't having it. But in the end, I did end up catching him and killing the rest of the family. And then I claimed another fast travel. And then I ran out of stamina in front of these Ragnarhawks. But anyways, I was able to get my stuff, but I wouldn't have it for long.
It was at this moment that he knew. He f***ed up.
Tripping, bro. You tripping.
If there's even one guy in these comments telling me that I suck, I'm actually gonna tweak. But yeah, I was able to get my stuff back and I dipped immediately. Then I went ahead and claimed this fast travel and went back to base. Back at base, I decided to go ahead and get Gale Claw back. Then I went back to the first base to put my egg into the incubator and hatch this rocky egg. Then I went ahead and made some more cryogenic coolant and a cleaver just in case.
Whoa.
Yeah, remember when I said just in case? Yeah, if you're under 18, you might want to close your eyes. After magically getting enough flame organs, I was then able to make an improved furnace. And remember that dick toys that I got? Yeah, it was an alpha, so I decided to put it into the base. And then I needed some Paldeum fragments, so let the grinding begin. and then I finally went back to base. When I got back, I realized that someone was plotting a raid against my base, but I knew exactly who it was. And then I easily beat the raid. Then I decided to craft a Ring of Mercy because I would need it for what I'm about to do next. Then I went back to the other base and watched this for a little bit. Then I made a bunch of arrows. And lastly, I made a bunch of spears. And now it's time to begin the plan. You guys might be wondering what the plan is. Well, the plan is to basically condense my Gale Claw into 4 stars so I can start moving at even faster speeds. And with that being said, let's get right into the catching compilation. Bye-bye! Oh yeah, then I also found this shiny muffler that I decided to catch. I know this isn't a Gale Claw, but I wanted to catch this.
Woo! Yeah, baby!
And finally, after all that grinding, it was now time for the moment of truth. After that, I then decided to go back to the first base and hatch my eggs, giving me a Relaxosaurus, a Blazamut, and a Gobfin. And I also refilled them with new eggs. Then, on the way to the desert, I picked up an ice support whistle and also decided to enter a dungeon. This was a pretty big dungeon, and in this dungeon, I caught a couple of Gillettes, and I also caught a boss Gobfin. And then I claimed my rewards, and I headed out. And just like that, I was finally at the desert. I then made my way over to the village. I then went and talked to this guy. Then this guy. And then I bought a Dinosum Lux. And then I talked to this guy. Then I went back to report to the client. And then in front of the tunnel, I asked Gillette to open this chest for me. Then I read this note and got racially profiled by the police. After that weird interaction, I then decided to go to the PDF station. And then I went back to talk to this guy. And then I left. Then I hatched my eggs, giving me a Lespunk Ignis, a Wixen, and a Sushi. And then I decided to fight Axel. Yeah, and he got curb stopped. And then for some reason, I decided to fight him again. Yeah, but it turns out I was just bullying Axel so I can level up, and here is me trying to get to level 41. I then also got an electric support whistle.
Yes! Yes! Yes!
I then went to farm some more Paldeon fragments. And after getting enough, I decided to go back to base. I then placed down a guild chest. Then I went and placed another guild chest back at base. Then I hatched my eggs, giving me a Catris, a Pyron, and a Lunaris. And yeah, you guessed it, another raid. Then I decided to destroy the first base because it no longer served me any purpose. Yeah, that took forever, but now this is all my chests now and everything is sorted in my base. And then I placed some egg incubators and put eggs in them. Then built an ore mining site. And then I decided to build a little area for my assembly lines. Later, I went out and came across a Lamball effigy and a Lift Monk effigy. I also took care of this dire howl. And then I decided to place a new base somewhere else. And then I decided that this base was going to be a breeding base, so let's get to it. Here, I built where they would sleep in their farm so that they can eat. And then I built their first ranch. And then I built the second one. And then I built a monitoring stand. And then I decided to put Blazemut and Moldrin inside of the breeding farm. Oh yeah, I also built a ranch. I then went and made refined metal tools. But yeah, I know y'all hear that sound in the back. Yep, turns out it was a shiny Swee that I did end up catching. And then I went to go farm some hardwood. And then I decided to check out Wildlife Sanctuary 2 and found out that the boss was an Astagon that looks so cool, and I will be coming back. Then I went back and found that they were done with their egg. Then I decided to really organize my base by replacing all of the chests with refined metal chests so I can have more inventory space and everything can actually be organized instead of just in a box. Alright, there we go. That took forever. Then I went to hatch my egg, giving me a Yormatite. But right when I put them into base, I heard a familiar sound. And it ended up being a shiny Hangu that I did catch. And then I built a crusher. And then I hatched the other egg. Well then, that is now the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed, I would highly appreciate if you guys consider liking and subscribing. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!